Johnny tightened his grip on the shock collar remote as the captive alien Trill let out a pained shriek, finally breaking under the ex-marine's relentless interrogation to reveal the horrifying truth: an imminent full-scale invasion of the Sol system by the merciless Trill armada. Wiping sweat from his brow, Johnny struggled to process the dire implications. Raxa, the Trill animal he oversaw as a zookeeper on the remote Ganymede colony, had actually been an advanced scout for the alien fleet. And now Raxa had confessed their sinister plan: exterminate humanity and strip the solar system of its resources. The stakes couldn't be higher. The survival of Earth and everyone Johnny held dear hung in the balance. As a battle-hardened veteran of the Mars conflicts, he knew he was the only one with the skills and grit to stop the impending onslaught. But to have any chance, he needed more intel on Trill tactics and technology. So Johnny leveraged his dominance over Raxa and the other captive Trill, forcing the alien to divulge critical information on the invaders' battle plans, weapons, and starship vulnerabilities. Armed with this vital knowledge, Johnny hastily transmitted a warning to Earth's defense forces. Humanity would not go quietly into the night. They would fight tooth and nail for their very existence. Johnny's mind raced as he formulated an audacious plan to single-handedly thwart the alien attack. The Ganymede colony was uniquely positioned to serve as his staging ground, with its remote location, radiation shielding, and Johnny's own stockpile of advanced weaponry. He would launch a preemptive strike on the invasion fleet, exploiting the weaknesses Raxa had revealed to cripple their offensive before it reached Earth orbit. But to succeed, Johnny had to find a way to rapidly cross the vast expanse of space and infiltrate the Trill warships, a task that would push his skills and determination to their limits. As Johnny loaded up on ammo and powered up his spacecraft, he reflected on how every moment of his life, the grueling Mars tours, his years taming unruly alien creatures, had been preparing him for this desperate mission to save humanity from annihilation. The clock was ticking, the odds stacked against him, but Johnny was prepared to fight to his last breath. Earth's 8 billion souls were counting on him. Blasting off in pursuit of the Trill armada, he vowed to make the aliens regret ever daring to threaten his home. With urgency burning in his veins, Johnny raced through the Ganymede colony's armory, grabbing every weapon and piece of equipment he could carry. His mind buzzed with the intel Raxa had provided, each detail a piece of the puzzle he needed to take down the Trill invasion fleet. As he loaded up the decommissioned shuttle, a familiar face appeared in the hangar. Lieutenant Mike Bulldog Thompson, Johnny's old friend and comrade from the Mars conflicts. Bulldog, now the colony's chief engineer, cracked a grin as he approached. "Heard you could use some help, Johnny boy," Bulldog said, clapping a hand on Johnny's shoulder. "Let's get this bird ready to fly." Together, they worked in perfect synchronicity, retrofitting the shuttle with advanced stealth tech and an experimental fusion drive. As they labored, memories of their time in the trenches on Mars flooded back. The heat of battle, the bonds of brotherhood forged under fire. "Just like old times, eh?" Bulldog chuckled as he tightened the final bolt on the fusion drive. Johnny nodded, a flicker of a smile crossing his face. "We've been through worse, and with the fate of Earth on the line, we can't afford to fail." With the shuttle primed and ready, Johnny clasped Bulldog's hand in a firm shake. "Hold down the fort here, Bulldog. If the Trill come knocking, give 'em hell." "Roger that," Bulldog replied, his eyes glinting with fierce purpose. "Go kick some alien ass, Johnny. We're all counting on you." As Johnny blasted off into the void, he navigated through the treacherous asteroid fields and radiation storms of the outer solar system, his skills honed from years of piloting in hostile environments. The shuttle's advanced cloaking device rendered him virtually undetectable to the Trill's sensors. Closing in on the massive Trill warships, Johnny's heart pounded in his chest. He maneuvered the shuttle with precision, edging closer to the command ship's hulking form. With a flick of a switch, he activated the cutting-edge cloaking device, the shuttle shimmering and vanishing from view. In the shuttle's makeshift lab, Johnny worked quickly. synthesizing a potent neurotoxin from the venom of one of the alien species he'd cared for as a zookeeper. He loaded the toxin into specialized darts, each one designed to pierce the trill's tough exoskeletons. Armed with the neurotoxin darts and an arsenal of high-powered weapons, Johnny steeled himself for the impending infiltration. He knew the risks, the slim chances of success, but he pushed forward, driven by the knowledge that Earth's fate rested on his shoulders. Suddenly, an urgent message from Bulldog crackled through the comm system. "Johnny, we've got trouble. Another Trill fleet, even bigger than the first, approaching from the opposite direction. They're trying to trap Earth in a pincer move." Johnny's blood ran cold. The stakes had just gotten even higher. He had to act fast, neutralize the command ship, and throw the Trill's plans into disarray before the second fleet arrived. With a deep breath, Johnny prepared to breach the command ship's hull, his weapons at the ready. The odds were stacked against him, but he wouldn't back down, not with the survival of humanity on the line. Gritting his teeth, he pushed forward, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Johnny's breath came in ragged gasps as he breached the Trill command ship's hull. The acrid smell of burning metal filled his nostrils as he slipped through the jagged opening. Alarms blared, bathing the corridor in flashing red light. He barely had time to get his bearings before the first Trill soldiers rounded the corner, their chitinous exoskeletons gleaming. Johnny's marine training kicked in. He rolled behind a bulkhead, narrowly dodging a barrage of plasma bolts that scorched the wall behind him. In one fluid motion, Johnny unslung his custom dart gun and took aim. The neurotoxin darts found their marks with surgical precision. One by one, the Trill soldiers dropped, their legs buckling as the potent venom took effect. Johnny didn't have time to savor the small victory. More hostiles were inbound. He sprinted down the twisting corridors, relying on the ship's schematics Raxa had divulged under interrogation. The pounding of Trill feet echoed behind him as he weaved through the labyrinthine interior. Reaching a junction, Johnny spun and loosed another volley of darts. 3 more Trill hit the deck, but his ammunition was running low. He'd have to be more selective with his shots from here on out. Back on Ganymede, Raxa huddled in his cell, tentacles pressed against a hidden communicator. "The human has breached the command ship," he hissed. "You must accelerate your approach. He knows our weaknesses." The response came swiftly. "Understood. The second fleet will arrive ahead of schedule. Hold your position. Reinforcements are en route to neutralize the human threat." Oblivious to Raxa's betrayal, Johnny pushed deeper into the ship's core. He located the primary weapons control room and set to work. His fingers flew over alien consoles, inputting the override codes Raxa had revealed. Warning klaxons wailed as critical systems went offline. Next, he found the communications array. A few well-placed explosives reduced it to sparking wreckage. Johnny allowed himself a grim smile. Phase 1 of his plan was complete. Earth stood a fighting chance now. He turned to make his escape and found himself face to face with a towering Trill warrior. Commander Zortex's mandibles clicked menacingly as he advanced on Johnny. "So you're the human who dares to challenge the might of the Trill Empire," Zortex growled. "Your pathetic species will be eradicated, starting with you." Johnny barely managed to duck the first swing of Zortex's razor-sharp claws. He countered with a flurry of punches, but they glanced harmlessly off the commander's armored carapace. Zortex pressed his advantage, driving Johnny back with a relentless assault. Pain exploded through Johnny's ribs as a powerful blow connected. He tasted blood. But Johnny Cooper hadn't survived the crucible of the Mars conflicts by giving up when the odds turned against him. As Zortex lunged forward, Johnny sidestepped and used the Trill's momentum against him. He drove his knee into a weak point in Zortex's armor, eliciting a howl of pain. The two combatants grappled furiously, trading blows in a desperate struggle. Johnny's vision blurred from a vicious headbutt. He could feel his strength ebbing. But failure wasn't an option, not with Earth's fate hanging in the balance. With a final surge of adrenaline, Johnny broke free of Zortex's grip. In one fluid motion, he drew his combat knife and plunged it deep into a gap in the Trill commander's armor. Zortex's eyes widened in shock before the light faded from them entirely. Panting heavily, Johnny staggered to the ship's bridge. He activated the comms system, broadcasting on all frequencies. "This is Johnny Cooper of Earth. Your command ship has fallen. Your invasion fleet lies in ruins. Humanity will not bow to tyranny. We'll fight to the last man, woman, and child. Turn back now or face total annihilation." As his words echoed across the void, Johnny knew his work was a long way to go. Reports of a second, larger Trill fleet reached his ears. Without hesitation, he plotted a course to intercept them. The captured command ship's engines roared to life as Johnny steered it towards the oncoming threat. His teeth gritted with grim purpose. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them head-on. The fate of humanity depended on it. Johnny gripped the controls of the captured Trill command ship, his squeezing hard with tension. The vast expanse of space stretched before him, dotted with the ominous silhouettes of the approaching Trill invasion fleet. His ribs ached from the brutal fight with Zortex, each breath a sharp reminder of how close he'd come to failure. Johnny's eyes narrowed. "How serious are we talking?" "Planet killer cannon. One shot, one dead world. We can't let that thing anywhere near Earth." "Copy that," Johnny said, adjusting his course. The Zora loomed ahead, a colossal monstrosity that dwarfed even the massive command ship he piloted. Its hull bristled with weapon emplacements, and at its heart, the planet-killer cannon pulsed with menacing energy. Johnny fired up the engines, pushing them to their limit as he closed the distance. The Zora's guns roared to life, filling space with a deadly barrage. He weaved through the onslaught, but several shots found their mark. Alarms blared as systems failed across the ship. "This bucket of bolts can't take much more," Johnny muttered. He keyed the comm again. "Bulldog, I need options, fast." "We've been working on something," Bulldog replied. "Experimental slipstream drive. It'll give you faster-than-light speed, but only for a moment before it overloads." Johnny's mind raced, formulating a plan. "Can you get it to me?" "Already on it. My team's prepping for remote installation, but Johnny, this is a one-way trip. You'll need to punch out before impact." "Understood. Let's do this." The next few minutes were a blur of frantic activity as Bulldog's engineers worked their magic. Johnny's hands flew over the controls, keeping the battered command ship alive under the relentless Trill assault. Johnny took a deep breath, locking onto the Zora's main cannon. "See you on the other side, old friend." He punched the slipstream drive. The universe seemed to stretch and warp around him as the ship accelerated to impossible speeds. The Zora's defenses might as well have been in slow motion. Johnny's eyes widened as the flagship filled his view. At the last possible second, he slammed the eject button. The command ship plowed into the Zora's cannon just as Johnny's escape pod shot clear of the explosion. The shockwave buffeted the tiny pod, sending it tumbling end over end. Through the viewport, Johnny watched as the Zora's primary weapon crumpled and went dark. A fierce grin spread across his face. Before he could savor the victory, a sleek Earth vessel scooped up his pod. He stumbled onto the bridge, coming face to face with a grinning Bulldog. "Hell of a show, Johnny boy," Bulldog said, clapping him on the shoulder. "But we're not done yet. Ready to take the fight to these buggers?" They led a strike team onto the crippled Zora, fighting their way through twisting corridors. Trill warriors fell before their advance, but the resistance grew fiercer as they neared the command center. Rounding a corner, they came face to face with a nightmarish sight. Commander Zortex stood before them, his chitinous armor scarred but intact. "You," Johnny snarled, raising his weapon. Zortex's mandibles clicked in anticipation. "Did you think you could kill me so easily, human?" Without another word, they charged at each other. The narrow corridor became a brutal arena as Johnny and Zortex traded blows. Bulldog and the strike team could only watch, knowing that the fate of the entire battle hung on the outcome of this primal clash. Johnny and Zortex crashed together, their bodies a tangle of limbs and armor. The narrow corridor echoed with the sound of fists meeting exoskeleton and the scrape of metal on metal. Johnny ducked under a vicious swipe from Zortex's claws, feeling the air displaced by the attack ruffle his hair. "You're persistent, human," Zortex hissed, mandibles clicking. "But your species will fall." Johnny didn't waste breath on a response. He feinted left, then drove his right fist into a gap in Zortex's armor. The Trill commander stumbled back, giving Johnny a moment to catch his breath. His ribs screamed in protest with each inhale. Down the corridor the sounds of battle raged, as Bulldog and the strike team engaged Trill forces. Plasma bolts scorched the walls, leaving acrid smoke in their wake. Johnny heard Bulldog's gruff voice shouting orders over the din. "Push forward. We need to reach those control systems." Johnny's mind raced. He needed to end this fight quickly. His hand went to a pouch on his belt, fingers closing around a small vial. Inside, a sickly green liquid sloshed, venom from the Zarketh beast he'd cared for back on Earth. As Zortex charged again, Johnny rolled to the side. In one fluid motion, he uncapped the vial and dipped his combat knife into the viscous fluid. The blade gleamed with deadly purpose. Zortex's next attack came fast and furious. Johnny weaved and dodged, looking for an opening. The Trill's armored fist caught him in the shoulder, sending him spinning into the wall. Pain exploded through his arm, but he kept his grip on the knife. "Your tricks won't save you this time," Zortex snarled, advancing. Johnny's eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that." He lunged forward, feinting with his left hand. As Zortex moved to block, Johnny struck with the knife. The poisoned blade found its mark, slipping between plates of armor and sinking deep into Zortex's flesh. The Trill commander's eyes widened in shock. He staggered back, claws scrabbling at the wound. What have you done?" Johnny watched as cracks began to spiderweb across Zortex's exoskeleton. The neurotoxin worked quickly, breaking down the Trill's biological defenses. With a final rattling gasp, Zortex collapsed. Johnny didn't wait to watch him die. He sprinted down the corridor, following the sounds of combat. The Zora's command center lay just ahead. Johnny burst onto the bridge, finding Bulldog and the strike team securing the last of the Trill crew. Bodies littered the floor, a mix of human and alien. Bulldog's face was streaked with blood and grime, but he grinned when he saw Johnny. "Took you long enough," he said. "We've got control of the primary systems." Johnny nodded, moving to the main console. His fingers flew over the alien controls, bringing up the ship-wide communications array. Taking a deep breath, he keyed the mic. "Attention all Trill forces. This is Johnny Cooper of Earth. Your flagship has fallen. Your invasion fleet lies in ruins. Surrender now, and you will be spared. Continue this fight, and you will be destroyed. You have 1 hour to withdraw from the Sol system." He cut the transmission, turning to Bulldog. "Now we wait." The next hour crawled by with agonizing slowness. Johnny and the strike team watched the tactical displays, tension thick in the air. Slowly, almost reluctantly, the Trill ships began to disengage. A cheer went up from the human forces as the last Trill vessel jumped to FTL, fleeing the system. Johnny allowed himself a small smile of relief, but the victory was short-lived. An urgent transmission cut through the celebrations. "This is Ganymede Command. We're under attack. Multiple Trill warships have broken through our defenses." Johnny's blood ran cold. He turned to Bulldog, seeing his own persistence mirrored in his friend's eyes. "No," Johnny agreed, already moving towards the hangar bay. "We've got a moon to save." They boarded a sleek Earth assault craft, joined by a team of hardened veterans. As they blasted out of the Zora's hangar, Johnny's mind raced. They had to reach Ganymede before the Trill could capture Raxa and turn the tide of the war. The assault craft weaved through the dense asteroid field surrounding Ganymede, dodging chunks of rock and ice. Ahead, a massive Trill warship loomed, its weapons trained on the moon's orbital defenses. Johnny's eyes narrowed as he studied the enemy vessel. "Bulldog, get me a secure line to Raxa. We're going to need every advantage we can get to crack that ship open." As Bulldog worked to establish the connection, Johnny began to formulate a plan. It was risky, perhaps even suicidal, but with Earth's hard-won victory hanging in the balance, failure wasn't an option. The assault craft streaked towards the Trill warship, running dark to avoid detection. Johnny's hands tightened on the controls. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he was ready to face them head-on. The fate of humanity depended on it. The assault craft streaked through the void, its engines humming with barely contained power. Johnny's eyes locked onto the tactical display, where a massive Trill warship loomed over Ganymede's orbital defenses. "That's one big bastard," Bulldog growled, his scarred face illuminated by the flickering screens. Johnny nodded, his mind racing. Raxa's intel on their ship layouts might be our only shot. We go in quiet, hit them where it hurts. Bulldog grinned, a predatory gleam in his eye. "Leave the noise to me, I'll give those bugs something to shoot at." As Bulldog's diversionary force engaged the Trill warship, Johnny and his infiltration team slipped away in a captured shuttle. The craft's alien systems pulsed and thrummed as they maneuvered through a hail of plasma fire and debris. "Hold on," Johnny barked as he rolled the shuttle, narrowly avoiding a stray projectile. They latched onto the warship's hull with a dull thud, magnetic clamps engaging. Inside, chaos erupted. Alarms blared as Johnny's team breached the outer defenses. Trill warriors swarmed the corridors, their chitinous armor gleaming under harsh lighting. "Left," Johnny shouted, recalling Raxa's briefing. They ducked down a maintenance shaft, bypassing a heavily fortified checkpoint. Plasma bolts sizzled past Johnny's head as they fought through the ship. The air filled with the acrid stench of ozone and burning circuitry. Johnny's team moved with practiced precision, disabling critical systems as they advanced. "Command center's just ahead," Johnny panted, his muscles burning from exertion. The doors hissed open, revealing a nightmarish scene. Krozak, the Trill commander, stood ready for battle. His exoskeleton bristled with lethal-looking spines, mandibles clicking in anticipation. "You dare invade my ship?" Krozak's voice reverberated through the chamber. Johnny didn't waste time on words. He charged, dodging Krozak's initial strike. They collided in a fury of fists and claws. Johnny felt his ribs creak under a vicious blow, but he pushed through the pain. His hand found the hilt of his combat knife, still coated with neurotoxin. As Krozak reared back for another attack, Johnny struck. The blade slipped between plates of armor, sinking deep. Krozak's eyes widened in shock as the toxin took hold. He staggered, chitinous limbs twitching uncontrollably. "What have you done?" Johnny shoved the dying Trill aside, seizing control of the ship's systems. His fingers flew over alien controls as he keyed the communication array. "Attention, Trill forces. Your commander is dead, your ship is ours. Withdraw immediately or face total annihilation." For agonizing seconds there was only silence. Then, one by one, Trill ships disengaged, retreating from Ganymede's orbit. Johnny allowed himself a moment of relief before turning to his team. "We're not done yet. Bulldog, what's Raxa's status?" "Still secure in the compound." Bulldog's voice crackled over the comm. "But not for long. Trill forces are pushing hard." "We're on our way," Johnny replied, already moving towards the hangar bay. They touched down near the Trill compound, a fortress of alien architecture, jutting from Ganymede's rocky surface. The air crackled with weapons fire as human defenders fought to hold their positions. "Jenkins, on your 6, Johnny shouted, dropping a Trill that had flanked their position. Jenkins nodded grimly, blood seeping from a gash on his forehead. They pressed on, the team growing smaller with each engagement. Johnny felt a pang of loss for each fallen comrade, but there was no time for grief. Finally, they reached Raxa's holding cell. The alien scout's multifaceted eyes gleamed with intelligence and calculation. "Cooper," Raxa's voice was a sibilant hiss. "I have information. The Trill's plans, their weaknesses, it's yours. For a price. Safe passage off this rock. You need me, Cooper. What I know could turn the tide of this war." Johnny weighed his options, acutely aware of the sounds of battle echoing through the compound. He locked eyes with Raxa, seeing the alien's desperation and potential value. "Deal," Johnny said, his voice hard. "But if you're playing us—" Raxa's mandibles twitched in what might have been a smile. I assure you, Cooper, my survival instinct is quite strong. As they secured Raxa for transport, Bulldog's voice crackled over the comm. Johnny, we've pushed them back, but they'll regroup. We need to fortify our positions. Johnny nodded, his mind already racing with plans. On it, Bulldog. We've got Raxa. Let's get him to Earth for a proper debrief. They emerged from the compound to find Ganymede's defenders regrouping. The Trill forces had withdrawn, but the distant flashes of Trill ships faded as Johnny and Bulldog surveyed Ganymede's battered landscape. Craters pockmarked the moon's surface, evidence of the fierce battle that had raged. We need to fortify, Johnny said, his voice tight. They'll be back. Bulldog nodded, his scarred face grim. I'll get the engineering teams on it. Over the next 48 hours, they worked tirelessly. Advanced sensor arrays sprouted across Ganymede's surface, their delicate equipment scanning the void for any sign of Trill activity. Anti-aircraft batteries, their barrels gleaming in the harsh light of Jupiter, stood ready to unleash devastation on any approaching enemy. As Johnny calibrated a targeting system, a transmission crackled through his comms. Cooper, this is Earth Command. Raxa's intel checks out. We need you back here, ASAP. Johnny's gut tightened. He glanced at Bulldog, who nodded, understanding. On my way. The journey back to Earth was tense, Johnny's mind racing with possibilities. At a secret military facility buried deep beneath the Rockies, he found himself face to face with Raxa. The alien's multifaceted eyes glittered as it spoke, mandibles clicking. Your species faces annihilation, Cooper, Raxa hissed, but I can help you avoid that fate. For hours, Raxa divulged critical information. Johnny's blood ran cold as he learned of the massive Trill shipyard in the Centaurus system, churning out warships for a full-scale assault on Earth. But it was the revelation of the bioweapon that truly chilled him to the core. A virus, Raxa explained, engineered to target human DNA. It would wipe out your entire species in a matter of weeks. The weight of this knowledge settled heavily on Johnny as he met with Earth's military leadership. The decision was unanimous. A preemptive strike was their only hope. Days later, Johnny found himself aboard the stealth frigate Shadowhawk, leading a task force of Earth's most elite soldiers and brilliant scientific minds. As they slipped into hyperdrive, he addressed his team. What we're about to attempt has never been done before, Johnny said, his voice steady. But the fate of our entire species rests on our success. We will not fail. The journey through uncharted space was fraught with danger. Treacherous asteroid fields loomed before them, threatening to shred their hull. Trill patrols prowled the darkness, forcing the Shadowhawk to go dark and drift silently past. Finally, they reached their target. The Trill shipyard sprawled before them, a massive construct of metal and energy fields. Dozens of half-built warships hung suspended in vacuum, a chilling vision of humanity's potential doom. Deploying stealth pods, Johnny's second-in-command reported. Team Alpha is away. Johnny watched as the first assault team slipped towards the shipyard's outer defenses. Their advanced stealth technology rendered them nearly invisible, allowing them to plant charges on key structural points. Team Beta, move in, Johnny ordered. Hit that research facility hard and fast. The strike on the bioweapons lab was surgical and brutal. Johnny's team fought their way through surprised Trill scientists, securing samples of the deadly virus and destroying research data. But their success came at a cost. Alarms blared throughout the shipyard as Trill warriors poured into the corridors. Plasma bolts sizzled past Johnny's head as he ducked behind cover. We're pinned down, a soldier shouted, his voice tight with pain. Johnny assessed the situation quickly. They couldn't afford to lose everything now. Bulldog, he barked into his comm, take half the team and get those virus samples out of here. I'll finish the job. Like hell you will, Bulldog growled, but Johnny cut him off. As Bulldog's team fought their way to the extraction point, Johnny led a smaller group deeper into the shipyard. They planted high-yield explosives at critical junctions, each charge bringing them closer to crippling the Trill war machine. The shipyard shuddered as the first explosions rippled through its superstructure. Johnny and his team ran, dodging falling debris and waves of panicked Trill workers. "Bulldog, status!" Johnny shouted into his comm as they neared their escape route. "We've got the samples," Bulldog's voice crackled back, punctuated by the sound of weapons fire. "But we've got a problem. Trill battle group incoming." Johnny's mind raced as he formulated a plan. Keep them busy, we're almost done here. The final charges detonated as Johnny's team reached their stealth pod. The shipyard began to break apart, massive sections tearing free in a spectacular display of destruction. As they rocketed away from the dying shipyard, Johnny saw the pitched battle raging between Bulldog's forces and the Trill warships. With a desperate maneuver, they slipped past the engagement, linking up with Bulldog's battered vessels. "All teams accounted for," Bulldog reported, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "Ready to jump on your mark." Johnny took one last look at the devastation they'd wrought. The Trill shipyard was little more than debris now, its capacity to produce warships utterly destroyed. "Take us home," Johnny ordered. Johnny ordered the jump to Earth, his voice raw with exhaustion. As they emerged from hyperspace, the blue-green orb of humanity's homeworld filled the view screen. A palpable sense of relief washed over the crew, but Johnny knew their fight was just the beginning. The Shadowhawk docked at a heavily guarded orbital station. Armed guards escorted Johnny and his team through sterile corridors to a secure lab. Scientists in hazmat suits swarmed around them, eagerly taking possession of the viral samples. Dr. Elena Reeves, the lead virologist, approached Johnny. Her eyes, visible through her suit's faceplate, were wide with anticipation. "Captain Cooper, we'll begin analysis immediately. With luck, we can develop a countermeasure before—" An alarm blared, cutting her off. Red lights flashed as a technician's voice crackled over the intercom. "Dr. Reeves to the main lab. Urgent." Johnny followed Elena as she rushed to the lab. Inside, screens displayed rapidly shifting DNA sequences. A young scientist looked up, his face pale. "Doctor, the virus, it's mutating at an unprecedented rate." Elena's fingers flew over a console, her brow furrowed in concentration. "This can't be natural. The rate of change, it's as if it's been engineered to adapt." Another scientist called out, his voice tight with fear. "Dr. Reeves, we're detecting trace elements of the virus in Earth's atmosphere. It's already here." Johnny felt his blood run cold. He grabbed his comm unit, contacting Earth Command. "General, we have a situation." Hours later, Johnny stood before a panel of grim-faced military and political leaders. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. "The Trill have outmaneuvered us," Johnny said, his voice steady despite the weight of his words. "Our only hope is to secure the original viral samples and research data from their homeworld. Without it, we can't develop an effective cure." Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the room. A grizzled admiral leaned forward. "You're proposing we infiltrate the heart of Trill space? It's suicide." After heated debate, the mission was greenlit. Johnny handpicked his team, selecting the best of Earth's covert operatives. They boarded a nondescript merchant vessel, its hold packed with advanced cloaking technology and weapons. As they navigated the treacherous expanse of Trill-controlled space, Johnny's nerves were on edge. Every sensor ping could mean discovery and certain death. "Trill patrol vessel, 2 million kilometers and closing," the ship's pilot reported, his voice barely above a whisper. Similar close calls followed, each one fraying Johnny's nerves further. Finally, they reached their destination. The Trill homeworld loomed before them, a world of harsh angles and gleaming metal. "Remember," Johnny addressed his team as they prepared to disembark, "we're merchants here to trade, act natural." They touched down in a bustling spaceport. Johnny led his team through crowds of chittering Trill, their mandibles clicking in a cacophony of alien speech. All was going according to plan until a Trill security officer approached, compound eyes narrowing in suspicion. "Your credentials," the Trill demanded, voice like grinding gravel. Johnny presented their forged documents, praying they would pass inspection. The trill's antennae twitched as it studied the data pad. Its head snapped up, mandibles spreading in alarm. Impuk. The trill never finished the word. Johnny's fist connected with its face, sending it sprawling. They sprinted through winding streets, plasma bolts sizzling past their heads. Johnny's lungs burned as they ducked into narrow alleyways, the sounds of pursuit never far behind. Finally, they reached the bioweapons facility. Using stolen access codes, they slipped inside. The stark white corridors were a maze of identical doors and intersections. In a secure lab, Johnny found what they came for: vials of the original virus and data crystals containing research notes. As he carefully packed the samples, a horrifying realization dawned on him. "This isn't just about us," he muttered, scanning the trill text on a nearby screen. "They're planning to use it on their own people." Before Johnny could process this revelation, alarms blared. The main doors hissed open, revealing a contingent of heavily armed trill warriors. At their head stood a familiar figure, Raxor. "Did you really think you could fool us, Cooper?" Raxor's mandibles clicked in amusement. "Your pitiful attempt at infiltration was obvious from the start." Johnny's team formed a protective circle, weapons raised. They were outnumbered and outgunned. Raxor stepped forward, his chitinous armor gleaming under the harsh lab lights. "Surrender now, and perhaps we'll make your deaths quick." Johnny's mind raced, searching for a way out. His eyes fell on a control panel near the wall. In a flash, he understood what he had to do. "I don't think so," Johnny snarled. He lunged for the panel, slamming his palm on the emergency containment protocols. Blast doors slammed shut, sealing Johnny and his team in a clean room. Through reinforced windows, they watched in horror as a fine mist filled the rest of the facility. Raxor's eyes widened in realization. He clawed at the sealed door, desperation replacing his earlier arrogance. "Cooper, what have you done?" Johnny watched as the Trill soldiers began to convulse, the virus working with terrifying speed. Raxor was the last to fall, his eyes locked on Johnny's until the very end. As the screams faded, Johnny turned to his team. They were safe for now, but the magnitude of their situation began to sink in. They were trapped in a clean room on an alien world, surrounded by a deadly contagion of their own making. "What now, boss?" one of his soldiers asked, voice trembling. Johnny clutched the case containing the viral samples and data. "Now," he said, his voice grim, "we find a way out of here. The clock's ticking, and Earth is counting on us." Johnny's eyes darted across the facility schematics displayed on his wrist computer. The clean room's sterile white walls seemed to close in around them as the reality of their situation sank in. "There," he said, pointing to a blinking dot on the holographic display. "Underground transit tunnel, it's our only shot." Sergeant Rodriguez peered over Johnny's shoulder. "That's a long way through virus-infested corridors, boss." Johnny nodded grimly. "We don't have a choice. Suit up." The team donned their hazmat suits with practiced efficiency. Johnny carefully secured the case containing the viral samples, double-checking the seals. As the airlock cycled open, they were hit by the stench of death and decay. Bodies littered the corridor, some still twitching with the last vestiges of life. "Move fast, stay tight," Johnny ordered, leading the way. They navigated the maze-like facility, their boots squelching in pools of viscous fluid. Rounding a corner, they encountered a group of infected Trill, their bodies twisted and deformed by the virus. "Contact!" shouted Private Chen, raising his weapon. The infected charged, driven by mindless rage. Johnny's team opened fire, their weapons set to maximum lethality. The corridor echoed with the sound of plasma bolts and inhuman screams. As they neared the transit tunnel entrance, Johnny noticed hairline cracks forming in Rodriguez's faceplate. "Sarge, your suit's compromised," he yelled. Rodriguez's eyes widened in terror as he felt the first tickle of contaminated air seeping through. "I can make it," he gasped, but his legs were already buckling. Johnny grabbed his arm, half dragging him toward the airlock. "Almost there," he grunted. They piled into the cramped space, frantically stripping off their contaminated suits. Johnny's fingers flew over the controls, cycling the airlock just as Rodriguez's suit failed completely. The inner door slid open, revealing the smooth metal walls of the transit tunnel. They stumbled inside, gasping for breath. Johnny allowed himself a moment of relief before reality reasserted itself. "We're not out of this yet, let's move." They set off down the tunnel, their footsteps echoing in the confined space. The air grew thin as they pushed deeper into the network. Suddenly klaxons blared. Red emergency lights bathed the tunnel in an eerie glow. "They know we're here," Johnny said, quickening his pace. They emerged into a vast chamber, a launch pad visible through reinforced windows. Between them and freedom stood a battalion of heavily armed Trill soldiers. "Weapons free!" Johnny shouted as plasma bolts filled the air. They dove for cover, returning fire. The close quarters worked to their advantage, negating the Trill's superior numbers. Johnny spotted a gap in the enemy line. "Cover me!" he yelled, sprinting toward a small planetary shuttle. His team laid down suppressing fire as he reached the craft. Johnny's fingers flew over the controls, prepping for launch. "Now!" he screamed into his comm. The surviving team members made a mad dash for the shuttle as Johnny fired up the engines. They barely cleared the closing blast doors, the shuttle rocking from near misses as they climbed into the atmosphere. Johnny gripped the controls, his nucleus tightening as he pushed the craft to its limits. In the rear view screen he saw the Trill armada rising to pursue them. The shuttle's engines sputtered and died, leaving Johnny adrift in the vast emptiness of space. Warning lights flashed across the cockpit as life support systems failed one by one. He clutched the case containing the viral samples, his last remaining team member's body cooling in the seat beside him. Johnny's fingers flew across the controls, rerouting power from non-essential systems. With a final push of a button, he jettisoned the cargo hold. The sudden loss of mass sent the shuttle spinning, but Johnny regained control just in time to see the Trill pursuit craft veering towards the decoy. "That bought us some time," he muttered, plotting a course for a nearby rogue planet. The shuttle groaned as it entered the turbulent atmosphere, the hull glowing red-hot from the friction. Johnny gritted his teeth, fighting the controls as the craft bucked and shuddered. Warnings blared as the shuttle began to break apart. Johnny strapped himself into the escape pod, clutching the viral data to his chest. With a violent jerk, the pod separated from the disintegrating shuttle. The descent was a blur of fire and noise. Johnny's stomach lurched as the parachutes deployed, slowing his fall but not enough to prevent a bone-jarring impact. The pod rolled to a stop on the alien terrain, its shell cracked and smoking. Johnny crawled from the wreckage, each movement sending waves of agony through his body. His hazard suit hissed, the toxic atmosphere seeping through newly formed cracks. He retrieved the data module and activated his backup transponder, the device's weak signal his only hope for rescue. Days blurred together as Johnny huddled in the shadow of the escape pod. His supplies dwindled, each breath becoming a struggle as his compromised suit slowly failed. As his vision dimmed and his thoughts scattered, a familiar voice crackled through his comm. Johnny tried to respond, but could only manage a weak cough. He watched through fading vision as a battered Earth destroyer broke through the clouds, shuttles descending towards his position. Strong hands lifted him from the ground just as his suit gave out completely. Aboard the destroyer, Johnny drifted in and out of consciousness. He caught glimpses of grim-faced doctors and heard snippets of devastating news. Earth had fallen, the virus had spread. Humanity teetered on the brink of extinction. In a haze of pain and guilt, Johnny received Earth's highest honors. The ceremony was brief, overshadowed by the dire situation facing what remained of the human race. As radiation poisoning ravaged his body, Johnny spent his final hours in the medical bay, relaying every scrap of intelligence he'd gathered. "Bulldog!" Johnny rasped, his voice barely audible. "The xenoforming facility, it's our last chance." Bulldog leaned close, his weathered face etched with concern. "Where is it, Johnny? How do we find it?" With his last ounce of strength, Johnny detailed the facility's location and defenses. As his eyes began to close for the final time, he gripped Bulldog's arm. You have to finish this. For all of us. Bulldog nodded, tears in his eyes. I swear it, old friend, we'll make those bastards pay. As Johnny's hand went limp, Bulldog straightened, a fire burning in his eyes. He turned to the gathered officers, his voice ringing with purpose. You heard the man. We've got a job to do. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.